Hey, welcome back to Forerunners. I'm Kevin Wallis, joined by VP of Forecasting from his brand new fancy studio, Korte. Let's get right into it. Top spots from the Surfline Cam Network. Where were some of the best places to be a surfer over the last week, Kurt?
Well, the first entry in a while, and I suspect it won't be the last. We're starting off at Pipeline here. Opening day, northwest swell. Still a decent amount of sand on the reef there, so a little bit challenging on the exits, but some really good waves here ridden. I think, what did we say the first two were? Who's on the first two? Kevin, do you remember?
Koa Rothman, I believe.
The Koa Rothman, and then this is Baron Mamiya here on this next wave. But yeah, just beautiful cams there. We have can't wait for the North Pacific winter so we can see lots of Pipeline here in the coming months.
And with number 4, this is a slightly different view of Pipeline, just up the beach, just a little bit. This is on the downside of that same swell on Monday. This is Benji Brand, I believe, getting an incredible left, and yeah, just beautiful conditions out there.
Shifting on over into the Atlantic, Supple, Barbados. Just a wonderful cam to check out the bowl here. And they've had a great run of waves in the Caribbean. But interestingly, I was thinking about this. Barbados, recently featured as the travel zone for us on Surfline, has great waves all around the island. The North Coast, the West Coast, the South Coast, all have waves depending on swell and wind conditions. But, the jewel there is definitely Supple.
And number 2, we're going to another beautiful spot that's Steamer Lane, quite a bit colder. But it was a great week of surf in central and northern California. This is at the top of the week when that northwest swell peaked. This is actually a relatively new cam for us, Steamer Lane close-up angle. It's a great look at Middle Peak. Hey, we've got plenty more swell coming up for northern and central California too. As we move through the next week, we'll have some more details on that upcoming a little bit later in the show.
All right, number 1, drum roll. Let's see what we have. Oh, I like where we're starting. It's got to be the land of rights. You know it. Here we go. Punta Mango. South Pacific, obviously, evidence here is still pumping out some swell. But when I saw this, and I think about this cam and the Las Flores cam, I think about an email that Sean Collins wrote back in either 08 or 09 about the interesting bathymetry that's right off the coast here of El Salvador, and how instrumental it was on turning on and off some of those spots. There's really shallow water that extends out around 40 miles, but really interesting features there that can really turn on and off the surf depending on swell direction, period, and tide. So love watching those cams.
Indeed. Well, speaking of top spots, Europe had an epic October after a largely slow September and most of the summer. We got an article up on Surfline now breaking down this past month. I knew I was going to do that. You can scan the QR code below to see the feature. Kurt, you actually did a lot of historical analysis for this particular story. This normally would be Jamie Bateman, who is our UK forecaster, UK-based forecaster, but he was out for a few days, I think chasing waves. So tell us a little bit about what happened in October, why it was so special. Generally Octobers in Europe are pretty good, but what were the things that you noticed for storm-wise, swell-wise, conditions-wise that made this last month so special?
Yeah, shout out to Jamie Bateman for using his use anytime PTO to score some waves here. I hope he got some good ones. I haven't talked to him since he got back on. And also shout out to Matt Kibbe. He's a forecaster for us that does a lot of our historical work and helped me with some of the analysis here for this story. But this time of year, we kind of look at the tropics still in the Atlantic. You have recurving tropical cyclones undergo extratropical transition and provide some solid surf for Western Europe and parts of Northwest Africa. Also, an increase in frontal activity there in the North Atlantic means, again, more storm activity and more swell heading towards the eastern part of the basin there. So, this time of year is typically what we see, right? And, this coincided with some really great conditions across parts of Western Europe. And you can see the result here, just, lots of great waves. As you think about it, like this is the time of year that this happens, right? We see a transition from the summer months into the winter months. And as you have that transition, you have the clash of warm air warm, moist air from the south and the colder, drier air in the northern latitudes. You combine those two things, you get storm activity, and that's what produces surf, if you didn't know that. So yeah, great run of waves there. And as we looked at this analysis, one of the things that we wanted to look at is contextualizing this, right? Like, we've heard a decent amount that the surf has been pretty slow over the past couple of months. But everybody kind of says that. I've heard it from people in Australia. I've heard it from people in California over the last couple of months. But to really just put a number on that, it was interesting to work with Matt and get an idea of exactly how good the surf was in October. And specifically, we looked at a couple different breaks across the Southwest UK, and we filtered out days that were at least 3 to 4 feet, so what we would say is waist to chest high on the face, and conditions of at least fair or better. And you can see here, October just dwarfs all the preceding months here. It was by far the best month we've had so far this year. And hopefully it's a telltale sign of what we can expect here as we head through November, December, and through the winter months. But October in Southwest Europe, or in Western Europe, you can do a lot worse than that for sure.
Yeah, it's on my short list of areas that I would love to visit. Okay, well, moving right along, we continue to get some great Ask a Forecaster questions on the Surfline Instagram account. So thank you. If you've submitted one, please keep them coming. We love answering them. This week's question comes from Kyle Suda from Oahu. Mark, if you could roll that question, please.
How's it, Forerunners? I'm Kyle Suda from Oahu, and my question is, with online forecasting being so good, is there any need for people to look at NOAA's buoy readings to forecast a good swell like we had to do in the past? Shoots.
Yeah, cheers, Kyle, for the great question. I think there is, in my opinion, there's always going to be room for buoy observations, just observations in general. Model guidance, as good as it can be, is just one tool in what I think is an overall forecaster's toolkit that applies to professional forecasters, at-home forecasters alike. And in particular with Hawaii, hey, you've got this network of buoys starting with Northwest Buoy, Northwest Buoy 51001. All the way down through the chain off Kauai, off Oahu with Waimea, off Maui, and then down to the Big Island. So you can really time the arrival of those different swells. It's really a great tool, and can alert you to a swell that may be a little bit early or a little bit late, and you might be able to score some waves in relatively uncrowded conditions. The other thing too is model guidance isn't perfect. As good as it can be off at times. We look at this screenshot here. You can see what the Waimea buoy measuring the incoming swell with the green line here. The model predicted wave height, swell height with the pink line. And this is just from this last Sunday when that new northwest swell filled in. So you can see there's really a pretty big difference between what was modeled to happen and what actually happened. So that can give you a great indication. The buoys can give you a great indication of, what board to potentially ride, if a swell's a little bit early or a little bit late. So those observations are really key. And again, it's a great tool to have in your overall forecasting toolkit. And in particular with Hawaii, when you have those more distant buoys, you can even get, it's a forecasting tool as much as an observational tool too, because you've got, roughly half-day indicator of some of these different swells. Am I way off base here, Kurt, or what else are you thinking? Should we do away with buoys or we keep them going?
We should add more. We mentioned the NOAA buoys specifically here, but there's buoy arrays around the world that are run by either government agencies or private companies that are just invaluable to use for observations. And it's in my mind, it's probably even more valuable now than ever. The way that we are able to separate out individual swells. During the hurricane season, it's just you can basically dial it down to like an hour to when the swell is going to arrive. It's pretty nuts. Yeah. So those observations are just, it's like I said, it's even more valuable now. Obviously the model guidance is getting better and better, as you would expect. We have a team here that works to improve the modeling here at Surfline, but as we go forward, like, give me an observation, like that's gold to me. So thank you, Kyle, for the question. And Mark, we can skip over to the clip of the week. We'll take a look at a pretty sick wave, Kevin.
Indeed,
we can run the clip here. So this is Ian Gottrin. He is part of a surfing family here in Dana Point, getting a sick little cover up there. Ian sounds like my kind of guy. I'll tell you that. He likes to get barreled, as far as I can tell from this clip. And he also runs Gato's Tacos, which is a taco catering service in Southern California. Sounds like I need to give this guy a call and hang out with him, because that sounds like a pretty sick thing. And also, he's got a movie out. It's Your Own Drum. It's touring around in some surf shops in the area. So pretty sick little clip there. Thanks for that on your Instagram.
Yeah, Ian, you got a big fan in Kurt. I think the only problem there is you're going left instead of right, but Kurt will manage.
That's even better that we split it.
This is very true. I just always thinking Kurt. All right, hey, well, moving along to some slightly larger waves, and by slightly I mean much larger waves. We asked Luca Padua, Mavericks local and Laird Hamilton sparring partner, to share 3 tips for the upcoming winter season. Luca and his magnificent beard sent in some helpful advice from Half Moon Bay, so let's check that out.
The Northern Hemisphere winter is officially here, and whether you're going to be looking to surf bigger waves at premier locations around the world or enjoy and make the most out of the winter swells at your local break, preparation is everything. 3 actionables. All right, we want to build ourselves into a seaworthy rig. We want to dial in our equipment, and we want to prepare our mindset. Surfing is about connecting with the ocean. It's about challenging ourselves. It's about having a blast. Tip number 1, build a physical foundation. Surfing is demanding, regardless of wave size, big or small. Our bodies need to be ready to handle the power of the ocean. I recommend identifying your own weaknesses. So paddling, maybe that's your endurance, your strength, or your mobility. Maybe your overall conditioning or breath holding CO2 tolerance. Identify a weakness, do your best to find a solution. Online, there's almost unlimited access now to experts that are outlining the processes by which you can progress through each one of these areas. I recommend going there. I'm always a resource if you want to reach out via social media. With that being said, you also don't need to train like a pro. Simplicity and consistency win every single time. So research, have fun, stay curious, and remember, a capable body and a sound mind usually lead to increased performances in the ocean. Tip number 2, dial in your equipment. Again, regardless of wave size, your gear is your lifeline, and just as important, you want to have the right tools for the job. So, to the best of your ability, try and identify those weaknesses again. Identify those gaps and prioritize what's important to you. Maybe it's staying warm and getting a new suit for the winter season. Maybe it's getting a certain type of surfboard that's going to allow you to ride a certain break or condition. Take the stuff out of the garage, get the dust off, get your feet in the straps and the wax, and go ride the boards regardless of what the conditions look like, because you'll thank yourself when it, comes game time. And if you can, 2 is 1, 1 is none. Get some backups, because winter's powerful, and you'll thank yourself when you're paddling back out instead of driving home with your tail between your legs. Tip number 3, prep the mindset. There's a real reciprocal relationship between 1 and 3 here, right? The physical and the mental. And as surfers, we need there to be a continuity between thought and action. That allows us to make rational decisions under stress, deliberate actions when it matters most. That could let you get the wave of your life or allow you to maybe save a life in the ocean. I'd say if you are pushing yourself this winter, your own limits, and you're feeling a little fearful or scared, that's completely healthy and normal, and embrace that. Like my friend Laird says, fear is a sign of intelligence. If you're feeling that way, you're likely in touch and in tune with what the ocean and the waves are actually capable of doing. Listen to your intuition. Some days I go out and I decide not to catch one wave because it doesn't feel right. And I'd also say, limit your expectation, right? Another Laird quote, low expectation equals low disappointment. Some of the best surf sessions I've ever had just happen when you go out and you're there and you're nowhere else but there. So be present and have fun.
And Kurt, hey, obviously beyond the beard, what are the things that stood out to you with that clip there?
That last point is something that actually really resonates with me, because I say that a lot. As we're forecasters, we're trying to predict the surf. We're trying to set expectations for people on what they think the surf's going to be like. And, I think about that a lot, like having low expectations, and just really appreciating what you have when you go and surf, like sometimes it's just sitting out there and enjoying the sounds in the crowd, the crowd and the clouds and, whatever else is going on.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's, it's like it's getting a good wave and, hearing it and feeling it and that sort of thing. So I don't know. It's just like the low expectations thing is something that really resonates with me because it's something that I think of a lot. Not because we have bad surf, but just because setting that I think is an important baseline in order to have fun, which is what this is all about. So,
Totally.
what about you?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, well, there are a couple different things. Number one, I just thought that was incredibly well done and well thought out. And from just a broadcast perspective, it was like, man, you just really nailed that in like what seemed like one or two takes, maybe a couple split. So kind of a random thing there. But then just that wave at the top that we showed, like backside turning up into the barrel at like I don't know, whatever that is, 50-foot Mavs or whatever. It just like what an incredible surfer and what an incredible job he's done to prepare himself. And Luca, we really thank you for sharing a little bit of your knowledge and whether you're going to surf in 2-foot waves or in this case 50 or 60-foot waves like he's regularly doing. I think it applies to all of us. So, hey, well, now that we're prepped to tackle some bigger waves, thanks to Luca's advice, let's see where those big waves might be found in the world. For that, we're going to bring on John Warren. He's on the line. He's going to come in. We're going to talk a little bit about the North Pacific, look around the world as well. So welcome, John, and stoked to have you here.
Aloha. Thanks for having me, guys. It's good to be on the show.
Yeah, so we'll start with our pulled back global outlook and the thing that stands out to me, and we've said this each of our last couple of episodes of Forerunners, is we continue to see stronger and more activity in the Northern Hemisphere and slightly weaker and less activity in the Southern Hemisphere, although the Southern Hemisphere is far from being done, as you can see a number of purple blobs down there. We're going to kick it over to the Indian Ocean now, and we are seeing mostly zonal flow, meaning most of the storms are moving from west to east and not necessarily pushing a whole lot of energy up towards the north or northeast, but still some respectable storms going on. And as we move out a few days, you can see that storm down below South Africa. That really could kick up some larger surf as we move into the longer range. In the shorter range, we've got probably the biggest surf for Western Australia is going to happen now and then settle through the weekend. It's going to be fun through the weekend, and then maybe something a little bit better in the long range too, kind of past mid-month. Also looks like we've got a decent looking swell for the Maldives coming up out of the southeast around Sunday and Monday. All right, moving over to the South Atlantic. What we got, Kurt?
Yeah, like you said, it's kind of slowing down here. We have a system that's diving southeastward off of Brazil. It's going to merge down with a system in the far South Atlantic and end up firing up that swell you mentioned as it moves into the Southern Indian Ocean. And we have a system there at the end of the animation, but for the most part, it's definitely a quieter time here. We're starting to settle into the spring. And, as we do that, we typically see our storm activity really restricted for pretty far south here, which limits the amount of swell activity that we get for spots along the South American coastline and even over into parts of Africa as well. So we continue to be Superman here, spin the globe backwards, and we're going to go over to the South Pacific now with Kevin.
All right, back to Clark Kent. So, I think the most interesting thing is probably what's going on in the Southern Ocean and the Tasman Sea. We've got some swell for the Victoria Surf Coast over this weekend. Decent surf for the west coast of New Zealand around midweek, around Wednesday, and then Fiji mid to later week. That's that purple blob that we see just passing Tasmania right there, and then dissipating a little bit as it moves into the open South Pacific. It just looks generally weaker in the South Pacific proper, but we've got decent little swells for Central America past mid-month. Really not a whole lot lining up for the U.S. West Coast after this weekend, but we do have a nice looking little south swell filling into California as we move through the end of the weekend, Sunday and Monday for Southern California. Extreme angled south-southeast, so not a lot of spots going to be picking it up, but we did see some good footage from Puerto Escondido this morning, so that's a great sign that south swell is on the way. Puerto was actually kind of pumping this morning, so nice sign that we've got a little south swell coming up Sunday, Monday for those select spots that can pick up that south-southeast angle. All right, moving up to the North Atlantic now, back to you, Kurt, and more activity.
Yeah, the first thing that pops in right there is that the large area of wave heights in the Gulf of Mexico. Really interesting scenario. Late season major hurricane Rafael crossed over Cuba and is now in the Gulf of Mexico. And the East Coast Surfline forecast team, so myself, Mike Watson, Charlie Hutcherson, Robin Steifer, and Tim Kent, were discussing whether we could remember a time that a system moved into the Gulf and actually didn't make landfall. So very unusual situation here, but it's going to send some waves to Texas, already some waves for the west coast of Florida and the Panhandle. But interesting things going on there in the Gulf. Outside of that, your attention moves further up into the North Atlantic, as we were mentioned during the Oktoberfest section. It's the time of year for it. We have strong storm activity moving up into the tip of Greenland there. It's going to send more waves to us. Not the best storm track with the system pointing northward, but definitely some waves. That's followed up by another system that's going to be pushing off the northeastern U.S. into the northwest Atlantic here as we head over the weekend into early next week. That's going to send more waves down to the Caribbean. Been a great run down there. We just did a feature on Puerto Rico. Really great run of past several weeks with light winds and really great conditions along the north coast. They had a contest of Megara that was absolutely pumping. But yeah, lots of waves, but really nothing too major. We were watching Nazare as we always do this time of year. Nothing major on the radar for there. But lots of more waves on the radar for those of us that aren't worried about surfing 60 to 70 foot Nazare. So good times to be in the North Atlantic. And as we transition into the North Pacific, we will discuss our Purple Blob of the Week with Mr. John Warren.
Yeah, definitely got a couple of good blobs moving through the North Pacific here, courtesy of a pair of storms that have been tracking through the western half of the basin. One of them's now making its way through the central to the east. Watching this next one that's developing here right now and over the next 48 hours, that's falling right behind that. So we got back-to-back pulses coming for the Aloha State. That first pulse will be building in through Sunday night into Monday. And it's looking solid. I'll give it a mid-range to fairly solid, relatively speaking, for Hawaii. Definitely pushing up to double overhead plus with the better exposed breaks there. As you can see here on screen, that's that energy right there with that arrow. That's going to be topping out on Monday. And then followed by a second pulse from that second storm that moved through, working with a pre-aggravated sea state. So pan is hot and ready to go, cooking out. The next swell looks a little bit bigger than the Monday pulse and a little bit more westerly. But the thing to consider here are the trade winds. Right now, Monday is your best bet to score one of these pulses with decent conditions. The trade winds will be pretty breezy on Monday, but at least from a more favorable easterly direction. And then with that second stronger pulse coming in for Wednesday, the 13th, it looks like the trade's going to be blustery from the east-northeast, so a little bit more side shore-ish, some trade swell bump also kind of making its way around the northern tip of Oahu here and mixing in, just making it a little bit more jumbled. So out of these next two pulses coming for Hawaii, Monday right now looks like your best bet to get some pretty solid surf and fairly clean conditions. And then, again, more swell coming for later in the week, but the trade winds look awfully strong and a little bit more northerly in it. So we're going to watch these pulses moving to Hawaii, and these storms are tracking across the basin and keeping that energy going further east. We have some solid blobs moving into the west coast. And I know, Kevin, you have been on that forecast if you want to take us through what we're expecting for California.
Yeah, I was able to do the Southern California forecast yesterday. Great handoff from Schaller Perry, our normal Southern California forecaster there. We've got a new northwest swell. It's going to fill in through the weekend Saturday for Central and Northern California, kind of the mid-size range. Gets down into Southern California on Sunday. A lot of north in that swell direction, though, so just a little bit of it coming in. But, if I was looking to surf on Sunday, and I am, I'm going to be surfing in my general neck of the woods, which is North Orange County, because, we've got that south swell that I alluded to a little bit earlier. Some northwest swell, looks like clean conditions in the morning. The Santa Anas that we saw earlier this week, those have broken down, but we should still see clean conditions in the morning with light wind. Could see a little bit of fog too. Heading into next week, one of these big storms that moves into the Gulf of Alaska is going to set up what could be the largest northwest swell of the year thus far for Central and Northern California. That's lining up for Tuesday. And that's got big wave spot potential all over it. Again, conditions aren't perfect. This last week, had really great conditions, all day offshore flow in area, like the Bay Area, I think on Thursday. Things break down a little bit, but again, looks like we'll have windows of favorable wind. And then starting around Wednesday and probably through the second half of the week, could see another offshore wind event as that swell tapers down. So a lot of waves lining up. windows and potentially large windows of good conditions, especially as we hit mid to late week. So lots of surf lining up. Fun to see the North Pacific fire up like this, and we'll see what it does long range. At least some indications, John, I think, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier on one of our forecaster briefs, that Hawaii may be slowing down a bit into the medium range as well. Is that correct?
Right. So definitely capitalize on these pulses, take it while you have it kind of thing. There's still a lot of potential in the North Pacific. We can see models trend up, but right now in the long range radar, it definitely will simmer down, relatively speaking, to what we're going to see this next week. But yeah, it's and the trades look like they're going to continue to rip too after these pulses. So we're not shifting into too much of a great pattern after these pulses. But like I said, there's a lot of potential in the North Pacific, and we're only going to move deeper into the season. So I don't expect it to last too long, but get it while you got it. For next
get it while
week.
You can. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question for you both before we close out here.
All right, Kurt.
Seeing that the purple blob is in the North Pacific, give me one spot that you think will make the top 5 when we record again in 2 weeks.
Steamer Lane, Santa Cruz, any of those spots.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with pipe on the Monday swell. Not a pumping pipe swell, but I think it'll be okay. And then I think there's decent odds that we'll get something from Mavs too. Great question, by the way. We gotta keep these going. But I think we'll probably get some Mavericks action. Maybe not, like, it's not the biggest nor necessarily the best angle for Mavs, but it'll be probably the first Mavericks swell of the year on Tuesday. I think we've got pretty good potential for that.
I give honorable mention to sunset too on Monday. I think it'll look really nice there on the cameras.
Yeah, cool, great call. Well, Kurt, John, that wraps up our show. Thanks everyone for watching. We're going to be back again in 2 weeks with our next episode of Forerunners on November 22nd. Until then, we'll hopefully see you out in the water.